Hello everyone, it's so good to be here again. I just came back from the cinema after seeing Irena's Vow, yet another very poignant World War II story that honestly I didn't know about. And this is a Polish story. It is a Canadian and Polish film production, and admittedly most of the film is spoken in the English language, which I do think is a bit of a shame. It's not the first time I give this kind of comment on this YouTube channel, but I do find in this era where international films are getting more and more stage presence, it's more than fine. In fact, I do think it's kind of culturally more interesting to have a film that actually respects the language of that era and place and time. Though nonetheless, there is quite a bit of Polish and especially German sprinkled throughout the film. And it is worth mentioning that though this is a subject of a Polish film, the filmmaker Louise Archambault is from Montreal, my very own hometown, so that is a rather cool anecdote for me personally. Not that it matters in the grand scheme of things, of course. So to briefly go over the film's synopsis, this is a true storytelling of Irena Gut, who started off in the war as a nurse, but of course things did not go well at all for Poland in the early days of the war, so she ends up being this housemaid for this very high-ranking German officer. And throughout her time being this housemaid, she actually takes the massive risk of sheltering a bunch of Jews inside this German officer's home. Can you think of a better place to hide people rather than under the very nose of the enemy themselves? That was her train of thought, and this film is the retelling of that story. And this is a story that Irena, the real life Irena that is, didn't actually divulge until like sometime in the 1970s. When apparently she was confronted with some Holocaust scenario, she was like, hold up a minute, I've been through some shit. Obviously not quoting word for word here, but you get the idea. And it is quite a powerful story that deserves to be immortalized in film. So this is a book adaptation of Irena's story, and there was also a Broadway adaptation. So I do consider this to be a very solid film adaptation of that story, and we definitely do feel those Broadway roots in this film. There are very few locations in the film, some exceptions of course, which I won't get into, but for the most part we're in this very luxurious villa where our housemaid is working throughout most of the film. Otherwise, we do find ourselves in this street market where we bear witness to quite a few different events throughout the war, and some of them, as you can imagine, are quite harrowing, as one could expect from this kind of period piece. The time period, set decoration, costumes, and all that are super well realized, and they're quite immersive. Musically as well, there are quite a few very touching piano moments. This is a bit of an amusing side note, but one of the piano soundtracks I thought was literally going to be playing like the Harry Potter theme song, but it quickly divulges into something else, which is a little jarring. Maybe I'm the only one in the world who thinks this, but in any case, the soundtrack and all the literal needle drops in this film of German songs playing on the vinyl and give an appropriate sonic ambience to the film. And without going too much in details, there is a decently wide cast, though of course our main heroine, acted by Sophie Nelise, who is a French-born actress who lives in Montreal, if I'm not mistaken, gives a very powerful and convincing performance. I will say that she did a pretty serviceable job of giving off that Polish accent, though I know that she's clearly not Polish. It was good enough. There are definitely some other actors here that you feel like we're kind of riding the line between the two, but seriously, she gives a wonderful performance, and she has this very necessary and powerful heroic drive that is just so integral to the film, and she really just holds up the entire thing on her shoulders. So a round of applause for her. And as for the rest of the cast, I do feel that a lot of their screen time doesn't have quite enough meat around the bones to have anything quite so substantial. There's nothing egregious, of course, but there it is. These aren't exactly characters that will vividly stick out in your memory. And of course, the Nazi characters are basically as we'd expect them to be. They're absolute monsters of human beings. This Nazi, who goes by the name of Rakita, definitely is condemned for war crimes, and apparently the charges were dropped, so that's fantastic. Not really, of course. There's one particularly atrocious scene in the film that I obviously won't go into details, but it was so disgusting that literally made me a little sick in the stomach, as it did to Irena, and there being this very fundamental change in her perspective in life towards a very heroic route. And speaking of these integral moments that shape her lives, I'd say my favorite character in the film would be this Herr Schultz, as they call him. At first, I wasn't sure exactly which side he was on, but he actually has quite a few very useful bits of advice to give to Irena that clearly she doesn't exactly agree 100% with him, and he kind of very subtly gives a thumbs up to her in the sense, but nonetheless, I feel like I'm spoiling a little too much. There's a very interesting and powerful dynamic here that I found to be quite fruitful and thought-provoking. So to wrap up my feelings around this film, I do think it's very clearly a very poignant and important story that deserves to be told, and is very much well made from a film production aspect. Though there's nothing that's particularly outstanding about the film, there's no cinematographic moment that is just embedded in my mind apart from that obviously atrocious and horrible moment that I mentioned a moment ago, but it's no artistic behemoth like Schindler's List, for example, or The Pianist, just to name two off the top of my head. Obviously, I'm going for like the classic of classics, but I think you get what I'm saying. So I don't see myself giving it more than a 7 out of 10. It is a very interesting film that I still highly recommend, especially through the lens of this historical retelling of a very important and a heroic effort, honestly, of humanity. Lord knows we need more of those today. So with all that being said, wishing you and your loved ones nothing but the best. As always, take care and talk to you soon.